The theme of the Teachers' Rights Committee meeting was defending education in a time of turmoil, and judging from the remarks of Joe Reed, the defense will be an active one. Reed said the public has the right to an education for its children, but parents cannot expect the schools to turn out a better child than's brought to it.
No more are we going to bear all of the burdens. Yes, we are going to teach the boys and girls of Alabama. Yes, we're going to be competent. Yes, we're going to prepare our lesson plans. Yes, we're going to do all that's necessary to bring about change in education in Alabama. And yes, we're going to be sure that when you send us, parent, a good boy, we'll send you a good man back. But if you want a brick house, send us brick. Don't send us straw. Don't send us straw.
Sounding somewhat like an evangelist, Reed turned from the rights and responsibilities of the schools and parents to the problem with judges in Alabama.
Not all, but by and large, most of the circuit judges in Alabama are nothing but political hacks. That's what they are. You can barely win a case before them unless you are with the establishment. Unless you're with the establishment. And I'll tell you this, except for Judge Frank Johnson and Judge Virgil Pittman and Judge Sam Pointer, the federal judiciary is no better. You can't win any case in the Northern District.
Joe Reed admonished the teachers to unite because he said educators must stick together if they want to progress in Alabama. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
There were noticeable differences in the Selma March. Back in the 1960s, there were no black police officers escorting the protesters, and they were noticeably quiet, very little singing. The march wended its way from the Tabernacle Baptist Church to Selma City Hall, a city hall that wasn't built when those dramatic marches of the 1960s took place. The major similarity is dramatic. This march was to protest the growing Ku Klux Klan activity, not only in Dallas County, but across the state of Alabama.
By our presence, we are saying certain things. One of those things is that we are not afraid. And by our presence, we are saying we will not go back to the 50s. We will not go back to the 40s. We're saying that we believe that if we unite and that if we stand up, that we'll be able to deal with this vicious monster that we call Klanism. By our presence, we are saying that Klanism isn't just the shooting of children in the dead of the night, but that Klanism takes many forms, and we are here to protest that. We are saying that we recognize that when we are discriminated against in jobs, that that's a form of Klanism. By our presence, we are saying that we recognize that when they don't call us Mr. and Mrs., that they don't want to recognize us as human beings. By our presence, we are saying that there are many ways that they treat us in low and dirty ways, and that they don't have to shoot us to kill us, that the spirit can be killed in many ways.
This administration has taken a strong stand against any acts of violence. We've made strong stands in all the news media that acts of violence would not be tolerated by any group, the Klan or any other groups, white or black, against its citizens. I have said this on many occasions. I hope you, the citizens of Selma that are grouped here today, will appreciate the fact that this administration, which Councilman Reese is a part of, will make every effort to not allow any group to take the law into their own hands. We've had some unfortunate incidents. I'm very sorry for them, and all in this city, the majority of the good-thinking people are sorry for those incidents. We've had the rape of a white woman, and we've had the shooting of 2 young black children. It's a terrible thing.
Selma's Mayor Joe Smitherman says there has been no public Klan display, such as the membership and fund drive in Montgomery streets on Saturday, and no planned Klan parade, such as the one scheduled for the capital city next Saturday. After a second stop at the Dallas County Courthouse for another brief prayer, the marchers returned to the Tabernacle Baptist Church. Clark Edwards, WSFA TV News, Selma, Alabama.
Prior to his speech at Tuskegee's Founders Day ceremony, Vice President Mondale held a brief news conference. With both of Alabama's U.S. senators and other state political figures in the background, Mondale told reporters that the Carter administration expects a tough fight over the president's proposed deregulation of oil prices and the oil profit windfall tax.
We need that tax. In the interest of simple justice, we need it, but I anticipate that they're going to oppose us. I was pleased to see a poll yesterday showing that 85% of the American people favor that tax, and I hope it'll pass, and we're going to do everything we can to do so.
From there, the vice president went to the Tuskegee Institute Chapel, where an overflow crowd gave Mondale an enthusiastic reception. The vice president's speech was interrupted several times by applause, once when he told the audience he was glad to be in Tuskegee, but he knew they would rather see the Commodores, and again on a more serious note when he referred to the history of Tuskegee Institute as the history of social justice in America. But the biggest hand came when Mondale made a surprise announcement that a new Job Corps Center will be built in Tuskegee to provide jobs for underprivileged youth. After his speech, the vice president was awarded an honorary Doctor of Law degree from Tuskegee Institute. Following the Founders Day ceremonies here on the Tuskegee Institute campus, Vice President Mondale traveled back to Montgomery for a reception at the governor's mansion. Chris Grimshaw has that story.
Over 200 people showed up by invitation at the governor's mansion for Vice President Mondale's visit with Governor James. Mondale, James, and Alabama Senators Howell Heflin and Donald Stewart spent ½ an hour talking before they joined the group waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Mondale greeted several, including former Governors George Wallace and Jim Folsom. Also seated is former Senator Lister Hill. Mondale then rejoined James at the microphone, where he related briefly his joy at James's push for a better education at the lower levels.
I happen, Governor, to be an education fanatic. I think that how we educate our children decides the future. And if our children don't learn the skills, if they're not learning to read and to write and to count, the basics, they're not going to make it, and they'll be the first to know it. And I'm pleased to know that that has been your emphasis here in this state, and I applaud you for it.
Mondale also made positive reference to James's political platform, pushing for more industry to be sought in the state, saying the U.S. was a work-oriented society and James's push was commendable. Mondale made no mention of agriculture, but just outside the mansion, 5 or 6 American agricultural movement representatives picketed for a better agricultural bill in the capital city. The visit to the governor's mansion was brief, mostly a ceremonial occasion allowing the many there to meet Mondale. Most of those invited in the group were members of James's present cabinet. At the governor's mansion, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
We visited the local model club when they were flying at their runway and staging area at Gunter Industrial Park. It was rather windy that day, and the club members were having to battle the winds, especially on takeoffs and landings. Some of the planes are scale models of real full-fledged airplanes, while others are designed strictly for model flying. The models are controlled by a radio transmitter, which is operated by the pilot on the ground. The signals are transmitted to the plane, where a receiver picks them up. Then the signals are translated into movements of the servo controls inside the plane, which make it go up or down, turn right or left, or in the case of more experienced pilots, spin, loop, and dive in certain designated patterns. Most of the club members build their planes from kits, installing the small 2-cycle engines and radio controls themselves. After the plane is all together, a paint job and decals are applied. The hobby is rather expensive, however, especially when you consider your handcrafted plane could end up in a pile of splinters.
Basically, you can buy a complete system for somewhere around $300. Includes a good quality radio, an airplane, and the needed engine.
The engines that propel the models are surprisingly powerful and run on a complicated combination of fuels.
Well, it's an internal combustion engine, two-cycle, usually about a 30, they call them a 30 or a 35 cc. That's 0.35 cc. Engine is about the mid-range, and they're relatively inexpensive. And
how much would it cost?
In the neighborhood of $35, $40.
What kind of fuel do you burn?
It consists of methanol, nitromethane, and an oil lubricant blend, usually castor oil. That is really the only thing that's a little outrageous as far as the hobby is concerned. It goes for about $14 a gallon.
And how much fuel would you burn up on an average day, though?
Well, personally, with the setup I have, I usually burn about a gallon. But with these smaller engines, just like an automobile engine, the larger they are, the more fuel they burn. You could probably get 15, 20 flights maybe out of a gallon of fuel, possibly more.
Just how much a pilot is able to do with his model plane is in part determined by the number of channels on his radio transmitter. The basic controls on the radio operate the throttle on the engine, the rudder and elevators on the tail of the plane, and the ailerons on the wings. If your radio transmitter has more channels, you can control things like retractable landing gear and other modifications. And the controls are proportional. In other words, if you push a little on the rudder control, then you get just a little movement of the rudder on the plane, and so on. Radio-controlled modeling attracts a variety of people from all age groups and occupations, and for a variety of reasons.
I like flying, and it takes a lot of my time away. So I just enjoy it a whole bunch. I think it's a terrific hobby.
It's just a challenge to keep one in the air.
If you have any interest in aviation, it's about as near to flying a real airplane if you can't afford a real airplane.
I think everybody, one time or another has had a dream of, being a pilot or flying, and some of us it's as close as we can get to it. It's just a real fun hobby.
For the more serious pilots, the club sponsors competitive events where the pilots are scored on their ability to perform a series of aerial maneuvers. In addition, there are regional, national, and even meets for the radio-controlled flyers. But for the most part, locally, there's a bond of mutual interest in flying, which has held man's interest for hundreds of years.
That's what's so exciting about this is you gather together part-time musicians. Most of these people, as I mentioned, are from churches or church choirs or have some musical background. Of course, they would have to in order to do this because it's a very monumental work. But none of them are professionals except possibly the soloists, and there are a few school music teachers within the group. But for the most part, they're just housewives and businessmen from town.
Captain Shelton is more than a little excited about the Palm Sunday performance with the Air University Band and the Montgomery Festival Choir. He assembled the choir last year for a presentation of the Easter cantata, but the whole idea of a community-involved project began several years ago.
I was stationed in the Philippines from 1973 to 75, and during my second year there, the choir director at the chapel and I decided that we needed to do something different for a change that hadn't been done before, and we chose the 7 Last Words of Christ as the performance. And to make it more interesting, we made it a community relations endeavor, international relations endeavor with the Philippine government. And I had the organ score at that time and decided to go ahead and do a band transcription. And after 3 weeks of candlelight burning, I came out with the final product, and we rehearsed the 13th Air Force Band, and the choir director gathered together a 100-voice Philippine-American choir, and we presented several concerts downtown and on the base, and it just became quite an event. And of course, when I moved here from Philippines, I brought the score with me, and last year we presented it at the Civic Center, and it just turned out to be a real great experience for the whole community of Montgomery.
Last summer, Maxwell lost funding for its concert band, so Captain Shelton is happy to return to serious music, even for just one performance a year.
I hesitate to say that I'm classically trained, but I have had a great deal of background in classical music, and since I've lost the concert band, I don't get a chance to do that type of work much anymore. So I thoroughly enjoy this kind of work, and it's the thrill of performance for me as well as a part of my job.
The civilian performers are not paid for doing the cantata. They also do it for the thrill of performing. Lisa Nielsen reporting for Alabama Illustrated.
Colors in the Wind is now on display at the Tumbling Waters Museum on South Perry Street in Montgomery. It's an exhibition of original design flags by Anders Holmquist. Holmquist is one of the few craftsmen of the art today, and he has designed a variety of flags for many uses. He has created personal flags for such people as Andrew Wyeth and Salvador Dali. Holmquist says that people today who order flags are seeking an expression of their identity. He says a flag is a beautiful manifestation of wind power. What are the specific kinds of flags that you make?
They are I think basically personal flags that people use either with their own sign-on or a flag that I have designed especially for them, or they just want some colors to fly for the meditative effect of a flag moving in the wind. A flag really makes people happy, and a flag is beautiful. I mean, that's why I make flags, I guess.
If someone called you up, and I'm sure you have this happen often, someone comes in and they want you to make a personal flag for them, how do you decide what you're going to make or what colors you're going to use?
Usually I don't know the person very well, so I make a psychological color test called the Lucier color test. It consists of 8 cards with different colors, and the person chooses the colors all through the 8 colors. So I get a feeling what their preference in color is, and also in this psychological test I can read the portrait, the psychological portrait of the person, which then, when I read it through, opens up a more intimate conversation, and I can much quicker get to the base of what the flag could possibly be. Sometimes it takes half an hour to decide what the flag will look like. Sometimes it takes weeks. I go and carry it in my head, and because everybody is really very different, and it is quite a challenge to make somebody's personal flag that they are going to fly. But I have had only favorable comments from people who have their own flags, so I guess that's part of the success.
Before we came on this interview, you made the comment, 7 years ago, if someone told me that I would be making flags, I would have said they were crazy. Now, explain that.
Well, I was doing design and photography, and I traveled, studied different religions, arts, and flags have always been, I think it has to do with that when we were kids in Sweden, we always had flags, and it was sort of a kid thing. In the school, when the girls were sewing, we were doing woodwork, but we had to sew one thing, and that was a Swedish flag. So I guess it was a little off to deal with flags, and that's why it was odd. But as we now can live our fantasies, our childhood fantasies, we can also make flags. And
What's your favorite flag in the exhibition?
It's hard to say, but the flags shaped like wings or with the tapered ends like the one behind us here, I think are in the line I'm working in. Also for aerodynamic reasons, the square flag seems to be much more torn and practically torn also by the wind than those who are ended in pointed ends, like wings, feathers. I have some of that in the exhibit.
What about the dolphin flags?
The dolphin flags, well, John Lilly, who studied dolphins for years, came in one day in my studio in Santa Monica and asked if he could have a dolphin flag. And I designed a flag, and then I made him one, and I have made a couple, which you see 2 different ones in the exhibit. One is more dark and contrasty colors. The other one is pastel, like in different waters or in different moods. They are designed 2 dolphins that seem to dance on the design, and when you fly it in the wind, one will be flying outside the museum, Tumbling Waters Museum. You'll see that they move even more.
Yes, I understand it was at your request that you had flags flying outside as well as having the flags on display inside.
Oh yes, because my interest is that flags should fly. They should use the wind, the natural energy. It's like a wind-powered kinetic sculpture. And I love the wind. The wind is magic, and I'm studying the wind at the moment. At a concert recently in Arizona, the music pavilion, music tent was down in the valley, and there was hardly any wind in the daytime and scarcely any at night. But we had 4 big flags around the stage, and when the music, the public, and the flags were moving together, I felt that the wind was just part of some, not mysterious, but some other energy that was created It was amazing.
Most of Holmquist's original designs are abstract or cubist and made up of pastel and primary colors. The flags and personal symbols that he designs are entirely different from those fashioned for kings and dukes and the traditional state flags we're used to seeing. The flags are made of Oxford-grade 100% nylon, the material you see used for jackets and umbrellas. Holmquist is currently involved in a project working with architects and urban planners and designers to incorporate energy conservation flags into plans as environmental art. In 1978, he created a permanent flag environment on Penn Station in Baltimore. He envisioned cityscapes of jubilant colors and pattern, flags that are respectful of energy conservation and contribute to vitality instead of pollution. Colors of the Wind will be on display at Tumbling Waters Museum through July 14th.
The Birmingham lawmaker used a report from the Southern Regional Council to point out the lack of blacks and women on major decision-making boards within the state. He said Alabama ranks very close to the bottom of the 11 southern states surveyed in the number of blacks and women appointed to such boards. Representative Harrison said 87% of such Alabama boards have no blacks and 73% have no female members. When asked about how the Wallace administration figured into the survey, since it was based on January 1979 board membership, Harrison said the facts speak better to what any previous administration may or may not have done. As far as Governor Fob James's record was concerned, Harrison said so far it has not been enough.
Of the few that he has made regarding the cabinet, I think that he could have done more. And that is not in any way taking away from the appointment of Mr. Gary Cooper with Pensions and Security and the judicial appointment that he made in the Anniston area and with Mr. Jim Littleton as one of his executive assistants. But I'm not, of all of the appointments that the governor has made to date, I am not knowledgeable of what all of those have been.
Harrison says he plans to present the survey, his ideas for an inventory of vacancies on boards, and a special advisory committee to the governor, and Hal Summerall, the governor's aide in charge of appointments. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Coming to the state after high-level jobs in the Texas and Arkansas prison systems, the new commissioner gave the reporters a wide area to cover in his first official news conference and announced that classification of prisoners and personnel shortages were among the most serious problems he faces.
I'm still learning about the classification system, but I know the system in itself is creating some problems. And I don't think there's any major changes in the classification system. It just needs to be looked at and appropriate changes made to make the operation of the Board of Corrections smoother.
Commissioner Britton then gave his philosophy about operating a prison system.
I believe that we should provide a very humane prison system, make available programs for inmates to improve themselves so that they can be citizens, taxpayers, and not burdens on taxpayers. In any way possible that we can provide money or have money coming in for services that would go to the cost of our operations, do it. And, prisons is not a popular subject among taxpayers, but we have constantly got to look at ways to cut in the cost of prisons because they keep going up. When you go to the grocery store, doctor, so forth, your medical and grocery bills, utility bills are going up. The prison's the same way. I believe in the death penalty. I believe it's a necessity that we have it. As long as the courts rule that we do have the death penalty and sentence persons to death, I will see that it's carried out.
The Texas native also said he was in the process of evaluating the performance of all corrections employees, including former prison commissioners Judson Locke and Larry Bennett.
Alabama now has a new prison commissioner. His name is Robert Bridden. Commissioner Bridden faces the same old problem as other prison commissioners, not enough money to implement the prison's programs. He is now working day and night on a budget proposal to be presented to the Alabama legislature within the next few days. Depending upon how much money the system is allocated, Robert Bridden will do a good or a bad job. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The program, which will be shown all across the state in the next couple of days, was shown to news reporters this afternoon. After seeing the program, reporters asked questions of officials in Birmingham by means of telephone lines. Steve Bradley stressed that the company is not trying to influence anyone through the program, but that it is purely informative. Later, he said the program is meant to convince the public of the seriousness of the power situation.
It's our responsibility to present the information. We have an obligation and a responsibility to do that, and whether people believe, we've got to try as hard as we can to convince people, and that's one thing we're trying to do here. But regardless of whether people believe it or not, it is our responsibility to present that information. We've tried to do that through the last several years, and we're going to continue to do that in the future.
Alabama Power Company officials say if the power company does not get its rate increase, the power company will not be able to maintain its level of service to present customers, let alone extend service to new customers. But despite the serious tone of the news conference and of the television program, officials never answered one question that was asked repeatedly, and that is, under present conditions, when can consumers expect brownouts and power rationing? On the question of nuclear energy, spokesman said the rate increase would enable the power company to resume construction of the Farley nuclear power plant near Dothan. In Washington, Energy Secretary James Schlesinger also spoke about nuclear power. He was asked what his department had learned from the Pennsylvania nuclear reactor accident. The commission originally asked for a 27% increase over last year's allocation for higher education. But the governor asked for a 10% across-the-board cut in college budgets.
The basic problem for your consideration here tonight is to determine, do we stand on the budget as recommended, or do we adopt some alternative?
The commission's alternative turned out to be a compromise. Members voted to ask that colleges receive the same amount of money they got last year. They pointed out that this amounts to a budget cut because of inflation. Some university presidents told commissioners they cannot operate satisfactorily without a funding increase. But as Commission Director John Porter pointed out, colleges can't necessarily have what's ideal, and the Commission must recommend what's practical. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News reporting.
Next fiscal year on the same appropriation that you are.
The State Department of Education, represented by Superintendent Dr. Wayne Teague, came before the committee with its presentation. Teague said the request for primary and secondary education is up about $64 million from last year, but he said his office has cut its budget by 10%. The subject of the 10% cut in higher education was questioned by Representative Pete Turnham of Auburn. Teague explained the feelings of the state board on that education cut.
Now, the board said that for the two-year colleges, if the four-year institutions took a cut, we'd be willing to take the same cut. If they were held at zero budgeting, we'd be the same thing. So it says now that they would be treated like all post-secondary institutions.
Well, how did you arrive at the 10%?
We did not arrive at 10%. We simply, that's the governor's figure, and the board said if all post-secondary agrees to that, and the legislature agrees to it, so will two-year colleges.
Well, what if they don't?
Then the two-year colleges, we feel like we're obligated to ask for the same increase or lesser decrease that the others get.
The subject of teacher competency came up, with Teague saying that he will submit a plan to the legislature after it convenes to address that problem. Alabama's junior college program was discussed, with State Superintendent Teague saying he deplored the idea of offering college courses at every crossroad. He said he was about ready to ask the State Board of Education to do away with off-campus courses altogether. Teague praised the idea behind the junior college program, but he questioned the need for so many. On Wednesday, the four-year colleges and universities go before the committee. The state of Alabama appropriates most of its money for education, and it came as no surprise this year that more money is being asked for that. But this year, when the budget goes before the legislature, there will be several more items to consider. Rising inflation, the cost of services, transportation, oil, gasoline, and that this year the Alabama legislature, in addition to considering all the regular legislation, the budget, the general fund budget, and the education budget, there will also be haggling over a new constitution. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The following is
Alabama
a special
Power
public
Company
information
officials say the
report
program is
from
intended to
Alabama
show the
Power.
company's serious financial troubles. The program cites a lack of adequate coal supplies.
Why is our coal supply lower than normal this year? Because back in December, when we did not receive the increase in price we needed, we were forced to cut our costs to reduce our need for cash expenses in order to operate the company so that we could continue to generate electricity for you.
But Legal Services Corporation spokesman Stanley Weissman says the power company overstated its problem.
For example, they were concerned about their stockpile of coal. They did not mention the fact that they have a fuel adjustment clause which allows them to collect very rapidly their expenditures for coal, and they can build up or lower their stockpile in a relatively uncomplicated fashion.
Weissman says he wants the public to realize the paid power company special was only one side of the rate increase issue. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, reporting.
The committee heard Director Rainer outline a plan that would bring the Highway Department $84 million. It would call for increasing the long-time 7 cents per gallon wholesale tax to 10 cents a gallon. Rainer said the tax would be designed to parallel the rise in gas prices, which have risen while the state wholesale levies have remained the same. Governor Fob James attended the session, adding clarification frequently to the proposal. Later, he explained the proposal.
We have a 7 cents gasoline tax now. It's been that way for years. It was that way when gasoline cost, say, 25 cents a gallon. And we are using about the same number of gallons that we've always used. So the revenue to the Highway Department has leveled off and remains the same, but the cost of maintaining the roads and building the roads, of course, has gone up the last decade or so, like everything else has. So this is a percentage, a fixed percentage, that would take into consideration rising cost, or if the cost of gasoline should decrease, it would take that in consideration too. And it's one concept put before this joint committee for their consideration.
Other committee meetings are scheduled tomorrow morning to discuss the proposal. Highway Director Rainer is on standby if the committee wants to recall him for review of the tax proposal. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
I am very glad, and I have found out that particularly in this part of the United States, there is a much more tolerant and a much more relaxed situation, and the way of life is much more peaceful, and the understanding between different groups of the society is really an example which we can learn about.
Unavoidably,
I am very glad, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Hogan.
We try to improve the treatment of young people and the vocational training and to provide more chances for them to get a job. And I think that...
have Dr. Hogan, who has been instrumental.
I'm very...
Inside the Capitol, they was having a meeting. That's what I like.
What'd you like about it?
It was scary.
Why?
I was scared of heights.
How about you?
It was interesting, and I liked the pictures that they painted on the walls.
What did you like about visiting the Capitol?
Looking at the statues.
Have you been here before?
Nope.
You ever want to come back?
Yep.
You think you might like to be the governor or one of those members of the legislature or something?
Yes.
What would you do if you were a member of the legislature?
Walk around this building over there.
Would that be all you would do? Walk around the building?
Nope.
What else would you do?
Okay.
Would you pass any laws?
Nope.
You wouldn't pass any laws at all?
Nuh-uh.
What would you like to be if you had a choice of being something in a state official? Whose job would you like to have?
Governors.
Well, what would you do if you were governor?
Pass laws, pass bills and stuff like that.
You would? You think you could have a lot of fun being governor?
No, sir.
You don't think the governor has fun?
No, sir.
Why not?
He has to do a lot of work and stuff.
Reed told reporters that this was the first news conference he's held in the past 15 years that wasn't controversial. He announced that May 25th through the 27th, Roots, Alabama, a black homecoming celebration, will be held in Birmingham. The three-day event will include a workshop for black Alabama political figures, a parade, special banquet, and meetings with a national black political caucus and with a White House representative who is yet to be named. 22 famous black persons, all native-born Alabamians, are serving as honorary chairmen. These celebrities have distinguished themselves in political, entertainment, and sports careers. This homecoming celebration has been in the planning stage for the past 10 months, and Reed says it's the first of its kind in the nation.
No one has done this before in the state. And of course, Alabama, believe it or not, is pretty far ahead on most states and doing whatever it wants to do. And I'm very serious about that.
Reed says Birmingham was picked as the site because of its facilities and the enthusiasm of Birmingham city officials for the project. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
Historical point. Blacks in Alabama have...
Commissioner Hardin told the committee he would need about $10 million more in his overall budget instead of $20 million he had originally planned on. This, he said, is in response to the governor's request for cutbacks. Many of the committee members were more interested in finding out other areas the department operates in. State Senator Bishop Barron of Montgomery said he is concerned about large amounts of land and a shopping center owned by the department.
And in my opinion, they are in competition with private enterprise. I'm concerned also that in the mental health department, they have their own personnel department. They have their own investments department. I feel like we have a central agency in state government to take care of those matters, and I feel like maybe there is some duplication, and if there is duplication, of course, it's a waste of the taxpayers' money.
Representatives of the Alabama Commission on Higher Education told the committee that the state's public 14 four-year colleges and universities could get by on no increase in budget. Commission Chairman Pelham Farrell said because they are advisory in nature, the state has lost $11 million because of unnecessary programs established by some colleges. He said the commission needs some teeth. He also said there are too many junior colleges.
Budgetary matters have commanded a great deal of attention around the Capitol the last few days. So far, most of the agencies of state government who receive funding from the legislature have appeared before the Special Budget Committee. It will be interesting to note what changes may or may not be made in these appropriation requests when the legislature returns to Montgomery in less than a week. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Asked me because I'm the oldest in the group.
trying to represent them today, and also that I was at Tuskegee at the time the College Fund was founded by my...
The Negro colleges need help, public and private. They're doing an outstanding job. I've seen the television commercial, and I've thought about it so often, where it says, a mind is indeed a terrible thing to waste. And I think this is the philosophy and the principle of this fund drive. And I hope everybody in the state of Alabama will participate. It's a most worthwhile cause, and I'm delighted to be a part of kicking this fund off, and wish you every success in the world, Miss Joyner, and I appreciate you doing what you're doing. Thank you very much.
The Westinghouse Corporation says it intends to build a plant near Prattville that will produce nearly 400 tons of nuclear pellets a year, and they say it can be done safely. The industrial announcement had almost as much positive comment about nuclear energy as it did for expanding industrial growth. To help the corporation make its announcement, the Montgomery Area Chamber of Commerce representative, Taylor Dawson, opened a volley of pro-nuclear welcomes.
We welcome the entry of Westinghouse Electric Corporation to the Montgomery area and enthusiastically endorse this new infusion of economic vitality into the state of Alabama.
Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer followed.
I pledge to them that I will do all I can to help in the tremendous licensing activity that will take a couple of years to get you to the construction stage. I know that you will work with us to ensure that to all of the citizens that we will have a safe, clean operation here. Westinghouse, welcome.
Also speaking on behalf of the Westinghouse power planners was Autauga probate judge James Corley, Prattville City Council President Malcolm Smith, and some Westinghouse officials. The Westinghouse official James Moore says the next 2 years will be spent in obtaining and qualifying for all of the necessary state and federal permits. Then, by 1983, officials hope to begin building the plant, which will look like this when finished. Moore says the radiation is very low at the plant, and employees will not be endangered, nor will citizens, because the pellets are relatively harmless unless under certain conditions that will not exist at this proposed plant.
It is only when many of these assemblies are bundled together in water in a reactor that a controlled chain reaction takes place. It is this chain reaction that generates the heat to drive electric steam turbines. Therefore, I want to assure you that the plant we plan to build here in Alabama will be completely safe to the workers and the public.
Since the 3 Mile Island nuclear power incident, anti-nuclear advocates have tried to cast shadows on the future of the industry. But the Westinghouse officials are confident, saying their product is not only good and clean, it's a sure bet for the future. But just in case, in between now and the beginning of construction in 1981, the officials say they'll keep an eye on the nuclear industry, and if there are any increases or decreases in the demand for nuclear power, they'll accommodate. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Many Alabamians may have been irritated when the legislature voted itself a pay raise during the organizational session, but few did anything about it. However, 4 residents say the increase is unconstitutional, and they've filed 2 suits to prove just that. Whether the suits, now combined into one case, have enough merit to be tried in circuit court is up to Judge William Gordon. For nearly 3 hours, the judge listened as attorneys for the plaintiffs and defendants outlined their sides. The plaintiffs charge the increase violates several sections of the state constitution, mainly that no business other than organizing the legislature be conducted during the organizational session. Secondly, no money be released unless appropriated by law, not resolution. And finally, legislators cannot vote themselves a pay raise during the same term of office. Defense attorneys say the increase is for expenses, not salary, so the case is unfounded.
We're seeking to have the case dismissed or to have the court grant summary judgment on grounds that there's no genuine issue of fact and that the defendants are entitled to judgment as a matter of law.
A decision is expected sometime next week. From the county courthouse, Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
The Bronner probe centered on the operation of this office, the General Services Division, and its handling of carpentry, air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing workers. Our sources say the finance director interviewed employees who worked in those departments about alleged wrongdoing on private property doing work on state time and using public equipment. Sources close to the investigation say as many as 14 general services workers have been called to this building and questioned by Dr. Bronner about the general services operations. It's also reported that air conditioning expert and Gordon's assistant, Walter Young, resigned earlier this week after being questioned in connection with alleged wrongdoing in that department. Darrell Gordon was scheduled to be questioned by Dr. Bronner today. It's reported that Gordon showed up for the session with a lawyer and offered his resignation, and it was accepted. One worker told us that Gordon went back to his office, took his things from that office, and left. The probe has uncovered some interesting allegations concerning violations of Alabama's bid laws and alleged misuse of state property. Gordon's resignation today is said to be a signal of more to come in the probe and that some high-ranking former Wallace administration officials could be involved. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Basically what we have done is that we have started a thorough investigation of the Department of Finance, and we started out in the General Services Administration. And in General Services we have found a number of rather small, minute, but very specific improprieties on the part of various state employees. And today we asked a number of them to resign.
Who are some of these?
The head of that department and some other professionals in that particular department.
What department head are you referring to?
Darrell Gordon.
Governor Fob James conducted the meeting. Trustees told him the university cannot operate under his suggested 10% budget cut. But the governor said he was grateful the trustees no longer are asking for a 46% budget increase.
And we want high school graduates to be able to get the finest higher education in the country in the state of Alabama. And oftentimes, money in one sense is a common denominator, but money is certainly not the answer to all of our problems.
The Auburn trustees voted not to ask for more money as long as other state colleges and universities follow suit. They said they agreed to the temporary belt tightening as long as the legislature realizes Auburn University is growing in the long run. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News reporting.
I think she was a witch. Debbie, that's right, I was a witch.
Oh my, who has an idea what Carrie was pretending to be, Joe?
I have an idea. She looked mean and she was smaller than a witch. I think she was a goblin.
Oh,
that's
Carrie.
right. I was a Halloween goblin.
Joe!
Excuse me.
Oh my. Who has an idea what Joel was pretending to be? Will?
I do, Alice. Joel looked to me like he was some kind of mechanical monster. And the only monster I know that walks like that is Frankenstein.
Joel?
That's right, I was pretending to be Frankenstein.
Who has an idea what Susan was pretending to be? Carol?
I think the way she was walking, bent double, like as if she had something on her back. I think she must have been a hunchback.
A
That's
hunchback?
right, I was a hunchback.
Who has an idea what Ken was pretending to be? Marty?
Well, at first, I'm pretty sure he was a bat. But then all of a sudden he changed into a person that looked like a vampire to me, and I think it was Count Dracula.
Ken? Boys and girls, today we have a special guest that's often associated with Halloween. I'm going to try to pretend. And today we have Philip Coe, Black Kitten, with us. Hello, Philip.
Hi, Alice.
We're glad you came to be with us today. Oh, that certainly is a... Suzanne, I've never heard of a name like that. What does it mean?
It's a Persian name, and it means black kitten.
Black Kitten. Well, let's talk a little bit just about cats in general. Do cats make good pets, Philip?
Certainly, Alice, they do. They make very friendly companions. And cats help men in different ways. By killing rats and mice and barnyards and houses and homes. And very few people are neutral on cats because they either hate cats or they either love them.